correspondence that produced nearly 2,000 letters. From the USS Augusta in Placentia Bay off Newfoundland in August 1941 to the USS Quincy off Alexandria, Egypt in February 1945, they spent 113 days together. By war's end, Roosevelt and Churchill would celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's in each other's company. Together visit Hyde Park and Shangri-La, the retreat in Maryland's Catoctin Mountains that President Eisenhower rechristened Camp David, and once slip away from the press of business to spend a brief holiday in Marrakesh, where Roosevelt was carried to the top of a tower to see the rays of the setting sun reflect off the snow-capped Atlas Mountains. An accomplished artist, Churchill painted the view for Roosevelt, the only picture Churchill produced during the war. The spring that Roosevelt died, he was planning a state visit to Britain. Reflecting on her father and Roosevelt, Mary Soames, Winston and Clementine Churchill's youngest and last surviving child, captured the complexities of the relationship by quoting a French proverb. "In love, there is always one who kisses and one who offers the cheek." Churchill was the suitor, Roosevelt the elusive quarry. Their friendship mirrored their private characters. With Roosevelt, Churchill was sentimental and shrewd. With Churchill, Roosevelt was cheerful and calculating. Churchill was warmer and more anxious for reassurances about Roosevelt's affection for him. Roosevelt cooler and more confident, alternately charming and distant. It is easy to be too cynical or too sentimental about the Roosevelt-Churchill friendship. Some historians have argued that the image of Roosevelt and Churchill as friends at work in wartime is in many ways a convenient fiction, largely created by Churchill in his memoirs in an attempt to build an enduring Anglo-American alliance. Another president and another prime minister, the clinical case continues, would have probably produced the same results in World War II. I think the Roosevelt-Churchill story, however, proves that it does matter who is in power at critical points, and that politicians, for all their calculations, deceptions, disagreements, and disputes, are not immune to emotion and affection as they lead nations through tumultuous times. Part 1. In God's Good Time. Beginnings to late fall, 1941. In the opening hours of a mission to wartime Europe in July 1918, Franklin Roosevelt, then 36 and working for the Navy Department, looked over a typewritten Memorandum for Assistant Secretary to discover what was in store for him in London. Reading the schedule's description of his evening engagement for Monday, July 29th, Roosevelt learned that he was to dine at a function given for the Allied ministers prosecuting the war, hosted by F.E. Smith, a government minister and good friend of Winston Churchill's. The banquet was held in the hall of Gray's Inn in London. It was a clear evening. The wind was calm, and Roosevelt and Churchill, the 43-year-old former First Lord of the Admiralty who was then Minister of Munitions, mingled among the guests below a portrait of Elizabeth I. What were Roosevelt and Churchill like on this summer night? Frances Perkins knew them both in these early years. A progressive reformer, the first female member of a president's cabinet, Roosevelt would name her Secretary of Labor after he was elected in 1932. Perkins saw their strengths and their weaknesses. She first encountered Roosevelt in 1910 at a tea dance in Manhattan's Gramercy Park. Perkins was a graduate student at Columbia, already immersed in the world of social causes and settlement houses. Roosevelt was running for the state senate from Dutchess County. "There was nothing particularly interesting about the tall, thin young man with the high collar and pince-nez," Perkins recalled. They spoke briefly of Roosevelt's cousin Theodore, the former president of the United States, but Perkins did not give this Roosevelt a second thought until she ran across him again in Albany a few years later. She watched him work the Capitol. Tall and slender, very active and alert, moving around the floor, going in and out of committee rooms, rarely talking with the members who more or less avoided him, not particularly charming, that came later, artificially serious face, rarely smiling, with an unfortunate habit, so natural that he was unaware of it, of throwing his head up. This, combined with his pince-nez and great height, gave him the appearance of looking down his nose at most people.